Hello everybody, this is Roger Hansen with the strange, the bizarre, the unusual. I like it. I will be continuing on my posts concerning the Greco-Roman mystery schools. I believe this is part 2 of it, and earlier I was talking about Egypt and how Greece and Rome and pretty much every kind of society back in those days pretty much, you know, ripped off Egyptian ideas. You know, they adapted it into their theologies and their beliefs and stuff like that. And a lot of the mystery schools during the Greco-Roman period really went around a lot of Egyptian beliefs, because you got to understand with Alexandria, when Alexandria was created, there was a mix of Greece and Egyptian as well as Middle East cultures, and a lot of the ideas that we actually have today, which pertains to old Greek beliefs and their ideologies back then, actually came from the Middle East. We lost a lot of that until later on, and a lot of people aren't aware of all these things, you know. So you got to understand, when it comes to the Greek mystery schools, that has a lot to do with Alexandria and the merging of all these ideas from these different cultures into that one city. But I wanted to get that out before I started. And I also want to mention something else too. Now, a lot of people, when they hear the word mystery schools or the Hermetics, or, you know, anything concerning the Freemasons, they believe that it's automatically conspiracy theory. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of conspiracy theories concerning the Hermetics, which is the Freemasons, and there's the Greek mystery schools, you know, the Greco-Roman mystery schools, and Egypt, and there are a lot of conspiracies, but you have to understand that it's more than that. I mean, these groups and these societies actually did exist, you know. For people who can rise above the whole conspiracy theorist thing and understand that these organizations did exist and it is a part of our history, you know, those are the people that actually learn something from it. And that's how I feel, you know. So with me, all of this really has to do with research, and it has nothing to do with pushing some kind of, you know, global new world order agenda. It's just the actual mystery schools, the actual hermetic groups, you know, situations, names, places, things like that. That's what I usually get into with it. So just understand that before I get started. And these reads are going to be pretty long, because I'm going to get into Greco-Roman mysteries, like I said, and my first project is actually going to be something that I needed to get off of here for a long time. It's called Praeparatio Evangelica. And I'll do all 4 books, and there's parts for each part. There's a lot of Greek symbols and a lot of different kind of things in there, so I'm not going to be able to hit every single part of it. You know, I can read what's English and what's actually readable, and it's a hard read, so excuse my vocabulary and my enunciation. I'll try my best to get the words out, and I'll slow down as much as possible. But with that all said, let me get started. Okay, now the Greco religions, the sacred mysteries, or simply mysteries, were religious cults of the Greco-Roman world for which participation was reserved to initiates. That's the mystai, M-Y-S-T-A-I. The main characterization of this religion is the secrecy associated with the particulars of the initiation and the cult practice, which may not be revealed to outsiders. The most famous mysteries of Greco-Roman antiquity were the Eleusinian mysteries, which were of considerable antiquity and predated the Greek Dark Ages. The popularity of mystery cults flourished on late antiquity. Julian the Apostate in the mid-4th century is known to have been initiated into 3 distinct mystery cults, most notably the Mithric mysteries. Due to the secret nature of the cult, and because the mystery religions of late antiquity were persecuted by the Christian Roman Empire from the 4th century, the details of these religious practices are unknown to scholarship, although there are educated guesses as to their general content. Justin Martyr in the 2nd century explicitly noted and identified them as demonic imitations of the true faith, and that the devils, in imitation of what was said by Moses, asserted that Proserpine was the daughter of Jupiter and instigated the people to set up an image of her under the name of Kor, the first apology, K-O-R, and the name of Kor, and that would be first apology. Through 1st to 4th century, Christianity stood in direct competition for appearance with the mystery cults, insofar as the mystery cults too were an intrinsic element of the non-Jewish horizon of the reception of the Christian message. They too were embraced by the process of the enculturation of Christianity in its initial phase. They made their own contributions to the process. In Clark and McNeill's opinion, the Christian doctrine of the sacraments in the form in which we know it would not have arisen without this interaction. And Christology too understood how to take up the mythical inheritance, purifying it and elevating it. The term mystery derives from Latin mysterium, from Greek mysterion, usually as the plural mysteria. In this context, meaning secret rite or doctrine, an individual who follows such a mystery was a mystes, spelled M-Y-S-T-E-S, one who has been initiated. From Meon, M-Y-E-I-O, or M-Y-E-I-N, to close, shut, a reference to secrecy, closure of the eyes and mouth, or that only initiates were allowed to observe and participate in rituals. The mysteries were thus cults in which all religious functions were closed to the uninitiated, and for which the inner workings of the cult were kept secret from the general public. Mystery religions from one of three types of Hellenistic religion, the others being the imperial cult or ethnic religion particular to a nation or state, and the philosophic religions such as Neoplatonism. This is also reflected in the tripartite division of theology by Varro, V-A-R-R-O, in civil theology, concerning the state cult and its stabilizing effects on society. Natural theology, philosophical speculation about the nature of the divine, and mythical theology concerning myth and ritual. Mysteries thus supplement rather than compete with civil religion. An individual could easily observe the rites of the state cult, but an initiate in one or several mysteries, and at the same time adhere to a certain philosophical school. In contrast to the public rituals of civil religion, participation in which was expected of each member of society, initiation to a mystery was optional with Greco-Roman polytheism. Polytheism. I always have a hard time with that word. Many of the cultic aspects of public religion are repeated within the mystery: sacrifices, ritual meals, ritual purifications, etc., just with the additional aspect that they take place in secrecy, confined to a closed set of initiates. This is important in the context of early persecution of Christians. Christianity was seen as objectable by the Roman establishment, not on grounds of its tenets or practices, but because early Christians chose to consider their faith as precluding and participation in the imperial cult, which was seen as subversive by the Roman establishment. The mystery cults offered a niche for the preservation of archaic religious ritual, and there is reason to assume that they were very conservative. The Eleusinian mysteries persisted for more than a millennium, more likely close to 2 millennia, during which period the ritual of public religion changed significantly from the archaic cult of the Bronze to early Iron Age to the hero cult of Hellenistic civilization, and again to the imperial cult of the Roman era, while the ritual performances of the mysteries, for all we know, remained unchanged. They had more often than not come up from the barbarous underworld. They were singularly persistent. The mystery of Eleusis near Athens lasted for 1,000 years, and there is reason to believe that they changed little during that long period. For this reason, with glimpses we do have of the older Greek mysteries, have been taken as reflecting certain archaic aspects of common Indo-European religion, with parallels in Indo-Iranian religion. The mystery cult of Greco-Roman antiquity include the Eleusinian mysteries, the Dionysian mysteries, and the Orphic mysteries. Some of the main divinities of the Romans, nominally adopted from other cultures, also came to be worshipped in mysteries. For instance, Egyptian Isis, Persian Mithraic mysteries, and Thracian Phrygian Sabazius, and Phrygian Cybele, or Phrygian. Now, Mithraic mysteries, and then the Thracian, Phrygian. That's spelled Thracian, and then Phrygian is Phrygian, and then Sabazius is Sabazius, Sabazius, and then Cybele, which is Cybele. Now, the list of mystery cults is the Arcadian cult of Despoina, and that would be Despoina. And then you have the cult of Attis, Attis. Then the cult of Cybele, Cybele. Mysteries of Isis, or Isaac mysteries. And then cult of Trophonius, and that's Trophonius. Then Dionysian mysteries, Dionysian. Then Eleusinian mysteries, and that's Eleusinian. Then the Mithraic mysteries, and that's Mithraic. Then you have the Orphic mysteries, Orphic, and Sabazios. Sabazios is Sabazios. And then you have the Samothracian mysteries, Samothracean. And then the Serapis, that's Serapis. So that's my introduction into the mystery schools, to bring that up. And now I'm going to go on to Praeparatio Evangelica. Now, that's spelled Praeparatio, and then Evangelica, Evangelica. This is book 1, part 1. Okay. The prominent position occupied by Eusebius of Caesarea in the Arian controversy in the Council of Nicaea has given rise to so many important treatises on his life and character that it would be quite superfluous to prefix a formal biography to the present edition of one among his many literary works. It will be sufficient to mention a few of the best sources of information accessible to the English reader. 1. The article of Smith's Dictionary of Greek and Roman Biography of Eusebius of Caesarea by the late Bishop G.E.L. Cotton. 2. Testimonies of the ancients in favor of and against Eusebius, collected by Valesius Henry de Valois, which is spelled Henry then D-E, then V-A-L-O-I-S, and appended to the Prolegomena, Prolegomena, on the life and writings of Eusebius in Dr. McGifford's English edition of the Church History, Parker, Oxford, 1890. Then 3. McGifford's English edition of the Church History, Parker, Oxford, 1890. Wait, hold up, no. 3, sorry, I reread that over again. 3 is the very interesting and learned introduction to the Greek text of the Ecclesiastical History of Eusebius, edited for the Clarendon Press by the late Dr. W. Bright, Canon of Christ Church and Regius Professor of Ecclesiastical History, Oxford, 1872. Then 4. Bishop Lightfoot's article, Eusebius of Caesarea, in Smith and Wace's Dictionary of Christian Biography, II 308/48, of which Dr. McGifford says with perfect truth, Lightfoot's article is a magnificent monument of patristic scholarship and contains the best and most exhaustive treatment of the life and writings of Eusebius that has been written. In each of these works, the student will find abundant references to earlier sources of information. There is, however, one interesting and important BI question concerning Eusebius, for a satisfactory explanation of which I have sought in vain, even in these copious and excellent biographies. What was the true relation of Eusebius to Pamphilus? Pamphilus, P-A-M-P-H-I-L-U-S. In other words, what is the exact meaning of the title? Your old Bible, it's written in strange writings. I can't tell you. But the inquiry is interesting because it is in connection with Pamphilus that we first hear of Eusebius, and it is not unnecessary because the older traditional explanations are very various, while in our own critical days we find the title sometimes rendered as Eusebius Pamphilus, and even as Eusebius the beloved of all, a strange designation for one who was so well hated by his more orthodox brethren. It will be convenient to begin with the summary account of the traditional notices given by Fabricius in his great work, Bibliographia Graeca, which is spelled Graeca, and Bibliographia, which is Bibliographia, and Eusebius Pampili, not the martyr's son, nor his sister's son, Consubronus, nor his slave, but a friend so peculiarly intimate that he took his name from him. On the supposed relationship, it is sufficient to quote Bishop Lightfoot's judicious remark, Nicephorus Salistus makes him a nephew of the martyr, yet it is somewhat strange that he himself should never allude to this connection, if it were so close. On the contrary, he speaks of his becoming acquainted with Pamphilus in such a manner as to suggest that there was no existing relationship which brought them together. In a note on the passage already quoted, Fabricius defends the rendering friend of Pamphilus by supposed examples of a similar usage. Thus, C. Avianus Philoxenus acquired the name Avianus from his friend Flaccus Avianus, as Cicero writes, Epist ad familiares XIII 35. The name of Varius he received because there was no man with whom he was more intimate than with Flaccus Avianus, who, as I think you know, was my own most intimate friend. XIII. On this example, it is enough to say that the Latin usage is no authority for the Greek. In the same note, Fabricius adds, Etiam ludus Lacobi et Petrus Damiani dictus Turcu a fratri, on Luke XI 16. Meyer remarks that it is usually rendered Judas the brother of James, and therefore the son of Alphaeus, but without any foundation in exegesis. Hence, here and in Acts I 13 we must read Judas son of James, of which James nothing further is known. And on Acts I 13, Meyer again remarks that the relationship is arbitrarily defined as brother of the younger James. It is son of and otherwise unknown. James, this interpretation is now almost universally accepted. Thus, Huther on Jude 1 writes, it is arbitrary to supply two instead of the usual supplement and ruse introduction to Jude. Kettle dernier formulae doit signifier necessarement fills de jacus et non frere de jacus compare vid idiotismus gracis, page 12. Vel involvit substantivum ut filios vel pro illo sumater, on which Herman remarks, anut ad vig de idiot, p. 701. Significant ut ons foisse, so phronisco unicum ut ulam esse soi or koi cui patir ferit, so phroniscus quo ab alice aliis secretibus distinguar, so phroniscum non aliam habet patrem, even patrem. Even, however, if we could admit and render brother of James, this extension of genitive and kindred would not justify its further extension to the relation of friend, and the same objective applies to Petrus, brother of Damanus, as to whom Fabric Tom XSI P88 Tom XSI P814 Saint Jerome, writing about 60 years after the death of Eusebius, speaks of him as the friend, eulogist, and companion of Pamphilus. Epilogue ADV Rufin I 9 Ipse Eusebius Amateur et Praeco et Contubernals Pamphili Tres Libros Scripsit Elegantissimos Vitam Pamphili Continentes. Again, the preface to his translation of the work of XIII Eusebius on the names of places in Holy Scripture. Jerome mentions that he took his surname from the blessed martyr Pamphilus, while the preface to his commentary on Isaiah and elsewhere he calls him simply Eusebius Pamphili. If it seems strange that Jerome, who lived in the next generation to Eusebius, has failed to give a correct paraphrase of his adopted name, we must remember that Latin, not Greek, was Jerome's native language, and that in the preface to his translation of the Chronicon of Eusebius, he speaks in the strongest terms of the difficulty of rendering the peculiar and, so to speak, the native idiom of the language. On this point, the Greek writers of church history are better witnesses than Jerome. Socrates, in the first words of his Ecclesiastical History, circa 430 A.D., calls him simply, without any comment on the surname, calls him some strange Greek writing name, and without any comment on the surname, which ought therefore be taken in its usual and well-known sense. Okay. On this point, the Greek writers of church history are better witnesses than Jerome. Socrates in the first words. I've already gotten that part. I've lost my spot. Okay, Sozomen, a contemporary of Socrates, in his Hist Ecclesi I 1.9 writes more strange Greek writing, and which may imply a patronymic and may be illustrated by Xenophon. Euconom, which is spelled Xenophon, Xenophon, and Oeconom is Oeconomvei.3, and then a bunch of Greek words. In a much later age, Photius Epist 73 begins a bitter invective against the reputed heretic with the words Eusebio v. Ot 2 Tou Pamphilo Pamphilou et E-I-T-E, Doulov, D-O-U-L-O-V, 8, E-I-T-E, Sunhq, S-U-N-H-Q-H, and then V. Upon this, the editor Beletta makes the usual remark that Eusebius was the disciple and friend of the martyr Pamphilus, from whom he took his surname. But it is evident that Photius himself either was or pretended to be ignorant of the actual meaning of the title. In his insolent insinuation, Ait Diolo V, which is E-I-T-E-D-O-U-L-O-V, is of course rightly rejected, as we have seen by Fabricius, Bishop Lightfoot, in the article already referred to, writes with just indignation. It was either a blundering literalism or an ignoble sarcasm which led Photius Ep 73 Beletta to suggest the IX explanation that he was the slave of Pamphilus. Any man might have been proud to wear the slave's badge of such a devotion. We come at last to the positive testimony of one who at least knew the proper sense of the title, and it's a Greek word. I don't know Greek, so when I say a Greek word, that's the reason, because I can't read Greek. Okay, the oldest MS of the Praeparatio Evangelica, Paris, in 451, has a scholion on the passage I3 Vig 7c3, which refers to the works of earlier Christian writers. Such say the scholiasts as were holy Justin Athenagoras, which is spelled Justin and then Athenagoras, Athenagoras, Tatian, Clement, the author of the Miscellanies, Micellanies, Origen, and moreover Pamphilus himself, the father of our present author Eusebius. Dr. Harnack, in his description of this eminence in Texte U, utters such, spelled T-E-X-T-E-U, period, U-N-T-E-R-S-U-H, or C-H, I, 134 remarks on his scholion. It is worthy of notice that Pamphilus is described as the father of Eusebius. So obscure already was the scholiast historical knowledge. In a footnote to this passage, Dr. Harnack asks why Pamphilus is mentioned here at all. Did the author perhaps think of Lucian, or allow himself to be misled by the title of the Apology for Origen? Again, on p. 177, Dr. Harnack says, this scholion is of later origin. Add to this that the learned Arethius cannot have supposed Pamphilus to be the father of Eusebius. As to Dr. Harnack's first objection, there is nothing to surprise us in the scholiast's mention of Pamphilus as one of the recent authors of whom Eusebius might have been thinking. His literary work was of a different character, less popular and less generally known than the writings of the apologist previously mentioned, and for these reasons, as it seems, the scholiast, in adding his name to theirs, introduces it by the words, and its Greek words. Dr. Harnack's passing remark that the Scholian is of later origins is not accepted by his very learned co-editor Oscar V. Gebhardt, who made a most careful examination of the Codex and assigned this particular Scholian to the ex-hand of Arethes himself. Texte u Unters, Texteu period Unters I3 183 in 70. Thus, instead of an ignorant scholiast of a later age, we have the learned Archbishop Arethes asserting that the title is to be understood in its proper sense. Eusebius, son of Pamphilus, and this we shall find to be consistent with all that we know of the relationship between Pamphilus and Eusebius. Pamphilus, we know, was many years older than Eusebius, was the director as well as the partner of his studies, and is always mentioned by him in terms not only of admiration and affection, but of the most profound respect. Thus he calls him the great glory of the diocese of Caesarea, most admirable of men of our time, of all my companions by me most fondly regretted, a man most glorious of the martyrs of our time for every virtue. The name to me thrice dear, a man who, though his whole life stone preeminent in every virtue, and when we add to such language the still more remarkable expressions quoted by Bishop Lightfoot. Okay. I need to watch how I do this. I lost my Lightfoot. From Curtin's edition of the Syriac Martyrs of Palestine, that heavenly martyr of God, my Lord Pamphilus, for it is not meet that I should mention the name of the holy and blessed Pamphilus without styling him my Lord, with such testimony of filial reverence. We can hardly doubt that when Eusebius adopted the patronymic O Pamphilo, he meant it in its full and proper significance, that henceforth he would call no man father save this best and dearest friend of his early manhood. How else, as Bishop Lightfoot says, could he express the strength of his devotion to his friend, who was more than a friend, than by adopting his name he would henceforward be known as Eusebius of Pamphilus. Let us only complete the title, Eusebius, son of Pamphilus, and so do justice to the old scholiast, that is, to the learned Archbishop himself. A further explanation of the patronymic may probably be found in the prevalent custom of adoption. We know that Pamphilus had gathered about him a collection of books which seem to have been unrivaled in Christian circles, Lightfoot Ibid, and of which Eusebius became the professor and the possessor and made a catalog. Use History ECCL VI 32. use history. Actually, it's EUSHISECCLVI32. I'll make a habit of keep doing that. That way I can distinguish, so you guys, that's a reference that you can check. So let me go on. I just wanted to do that because that was a mistake I was about ready to make. It is therefore most probable that Pamphilus had made Eusebius his heir, and the only way in which a childless individual could acquire an heir was by adopting him. That's from Professor W.M. Ramsey, Expositor, September of 1898, page 204. C.F. Herman, Political Antiquities of Greece, 120. The appointment of an heir event by will could take place only by adoption. This statement that the heir was necessarily an adopted son is confirmed, among other passages, by Plato, Laws 9:24a, and by Isaiah 66:31. They would not have represented that a son had been adopted by Aristarchus, Aristarchus, into this inheritance. If Eusebius was thus made the heir of Pamphilus, his legal and usual designation would henceforth be, and then it's a Greek word, and in any case, whether he was actually adopted or took the patronymic as a symbol of respect and affection, the only true rendering is, I believe, Eusebius, son of Pamphilus. The work itself contains no direct statement of the date at which it was written, and it is difficult to determine this very closely from the allusions of contemporary events, especially to the persecutions of the Christians and the subsequent prosperity of their religion. The persecution commenced by Diocletian, February 24th, 303 A.D., and continued by Galerius, ceased by his edict in 311 A.D. Speaking of this persecution, Eusebius says in ECCL.HISTVII 16 that having begun to decrease after the 8th year, through the grace of God, it ceased altogether in the 12th year, after the defeat of Maxentius in 312 A.D. Constantine and Licinus gave freedom to Christians, which was confirmed by the Edict XII of Milan late in the same year, and that's in EUS ECCL HIS X5. With these historical statements, we have to compare the allusions to the condition of the Christians in the two portions of the great apologetic work of the same author. We may notice first certain passages which seem to have been written just before or immediately after, and finally cessation of the persecution. And Praep EV 584 AB, or Praep, PRAEP dot EV 584 A B. Even up to the present time, the noble witness, martyrs of our Savior throughout the whole inhabited world, while practicing not to seem, but to be just as devout, have suffered all things that Plato enumerated. Here's the words, and it's some Greek words here, imply that the persecuted, if not still raging, had very recently ceased. Another passage, which seems to have been written before the persecution had come to an end, is found in Demonstration of the Gospel, III 5.78, commenting on our Savior's prophecy, and that's Matt XXIV 9, Luke XXI 12, that his disciples should be brought before rulers and kings for his name's sake. He adds, and shall suffer all kinds of punishment for no fault or other good reason, but all this solely for his name's sake. And we may marvel at the prediction when we see this working up to the present time. For the confession of the name of Jesus is wont to inflame the wrath of the rulers, so that though no fault has been committed by one who confesses Christ, they punish him cruelly for his name's sake. Here again, the present tense, and they got a Greek word, seems to imply the persecution was still raging. A strong contrast to the language of these earlier passages is found in the Demonstration v. 3.11, who therefore, on seeing the churches of our Savior flourish in the midst of the cities and in villages and country places throughout the whole inhabited world, and the people being ruled by him. Again in Praeparatio EV 9 D7, Eusebius, speaking of the Christian religion, says, after these many years of persecution it shines forth far more brightly, and daily becomes more conspicuous, and grows and multiplies more and more. From such a description, it is evident that the great change had occurred in the policy of the Roman emperors towards the Christian religion, and we may fairly conclude that the earlier passages were written shortly before or shortly after the cessation of the persecution, and the later after some years of peace and prosperity. Considering that the preparation and the demonstration are the two connected portions of one great work which must have been a long time in execution, we cannot be surprised at finding indications of different dates occurring in different parts of two treatises, and though unable to fix a precise date either for the commencement or for the completion of the whole work, we can hardly be wrong in saying that it was began about the year 312 AD, but not finished till a few years afterwards. On this later point, we have an interesting note of time of Praeparatio EV 134. Many of the most highly inspired, even of their chief hierophants, Hierophant, and theologians and prophets, who were celebrated for this kind of theosophy, not only in former times, but also recently in our own day, under cruel tortures, before the Roman courts, declared that the whole delusion was produced by human frauds. The passage evidently refers to the punishment of the false prophets and hierophants described in Eusebius, hist, H-I-S-T, .eccl, .ix11. Licinius, on arriving at the city of Antioch, made a search for impostors and tortured the prophets and priests of the newly erected statue, asking them for what reason they practices their deception. And when under the stress of torture they were no longer able to conceal the matter, they declared that the whole mystery was a fraud contrived by the art of Theotechnus, Theotechnus. He therefore meted out just judgment to all of them, and first put Theotechnus himself to death, and then his confederates in the imposture after innumerable tortures. These executions took place immediately after the death of Maximus in 313 A.D. and were followed by a further decree of toleration for the Christians. We cannot be wrong, therefore, in saying that the words recently in our times were written neither before nor much after 314 A.D. The time thus indicated in the work itself was especially opportune for such a defense of Christianity as Eusebius was undertaking. Persecution had ceased for the present, and there was no immediate need for such appeals to the justice of mercy on pagan emperors as had been formed a chief subject of the first Christian apologists. But the remembrance of the suffering endured, especially by the martyrs of Palestine, had witnessed, if not actually shared by Eusebius himself, was still fresh, nor could there be any assurance that persecution would not be renewed under emperors less favorable of Christianity or less prudent than Constantine. The wavering attitude of the emperor himself at this period is well described by Gibbon, C.XX. The devotion of Constantine was more peculiarly directed to the genius of the sun, the Apollo of Greek, the Roman mythology, and he was pleased to be god of light and poetry. Alright, so now I am continuing with Praeparatio Evangelica, Book 1, Part 1, and I spell that Praeparatio, Evangelica, Evangelica. The reason why I'm reading this book is because I'm going through and I'm discussing Greco-Roman mystery schools. And at first I wasn't going to read all of this, but I figured I would go ahead and give the information out. It's going to be a long reading, so let me continue where I left off. Okay. I was talking about Constantine. The wavering attitude of the emperor himself at this period is well described by Gibbon, Gibbon, CXX. The devotion of Constantine was more peculiarly directed to the genius of the sun, the Apollo of Greek and Roman mythology, and he was pleased to be represented with the symbols of the god of light and poetry. As long as Constantine exercised a limited sovereignty over the provinces of Gaul, his Christian subjects were protected by the authority and perhaps by the laws of a prince who wisely left to the gods the care of vindicating their honor. If we may credit the assertion of Constantine himself, he had been an indignant spectator of the savage cruelties which were inflicted by the hands of Roman soldiers on those citizens whose religion was their own crime. If the prudent policy of the emperor was dictated by a sense of the growing power of Christianity in the state, nothing could help so much to strengthen this feeling and turn it into a permanent conviction as a full exhibition of the contrast between the effete superstitions and gross immorality of paganism and the pure and vigorous spirit of the new religion. The conflict was not ended, but it had assumed a new character. Persecution had failed, but our weapons, not less formidable, remained. The old charges of atheism, apostasy, and hostility of the state, though often refuted, were constantly renewed. Learning the philosophy lent their aid both in attacking the supposed credulity of the Christians and in endeavoring to infuse new life into the ancient polytheism. Porphyry, the most learned and able philosopher of his age and the bitterest opponent of Christianity, was but lately dead, and had left behind him a work of 15 books against the Christians. As far as we can judge from the fragments that remain, this was the most comprehensive and powerful attack that had yet been made upon the new faith. Eusebius was keenly alive both to the ability of the author and to the dangerous character of his criticisms, and there was need as well as opportunity for a new and comprehensive defense of the truth so vehemently attacked. In explaining the plan of his treatises, Eusebius promised 7a1 that his purpose shall be worked out in a way of his own, differing from the method of the many Christian authors who had preceded him. This promise is further explained, 17a1, as meaning that his arguments will not depend on his own statements, but will be given in the very words of the most learned and best-known advocates of the pagan religion, that so the evidence alleged may not be suspected of being invented by himself. The cogency of this mode of argument, truthfully and fairly conducted, is unquestionable, but it had not in this case such entire novelty as Eusebius seems to claim for it. We shall find as we proceed that many of his arguments are the same as those of the early apologists, Aristides, Justin Martyr, Tatian, Clement of Alexandria, and Origen, that he constantly borrows long passages from their writings, including the same quotations from Greek authors, reproduced word for word with due acknowledgement. Those earlier authors had in fact adopted the very same method which Eusebius announced as distinctive of his own work. The quotations thus borrowed are, however, few in comparison with the great multitude gathered by Eusebius himself from all parts of the Greek literature in 1,000 years, from works both known and unknown of poets, historians, and philosophers. The peculiar value of the Praeparatio, Praeparatio, resulting from this wealth of quotation is universally acknowledged. This book is almost as important to us in the study of ancient philosophy as the Chronicon is with reference to history, since in it are present specimens of the writings of almost every philosopher of any note whose works are not now extant. G.E.L. Cotton, Dict, D-I-C-T G.K. and R. B-I-O-G-R. Eusebius 116b. The preparation exhibits the same wide range of acquaintance with the classical writers of Greece which the history exhibits in the domain of Christian literature. The list of writers quoted or referred to is astonishing for its length. See Fabric, F-A-B-R-I-C .B-I-B-L .G-R-A-E-C .V-I-I 346. Some of these are known to us, even by name, only through Eusebius, and of several others he has preserved large portions which are not otherwise extant. It was chiefly the impression produced by this mass of learning which led Scaliger to describe it as Divini Commentarii, and Cave to call it Opus Perfecto Nobilissimum, which is O-P-U-S P-R-O-F-E-C-T-O Nobilississimum, and Divini Commentarii is spelled Divincommentari. That's from H-L-I-P 78. Smith and Wace's Dictionary, C-H-R, Biography, I 331. It follows from the nature of the method thus described that the values of the treatises does not depend on the literary styles of Eusebius. His part of the work is that of an editor or compiler rather than of an original author. His own contributions are small, except in a few places such as Book V.I. Chapter 6, on the subject of fate and free will, and the earlier chapters of Book VII, in which he describes the religious ideas and mode of life of the original Hebrews. For the most part, he is content to give short notices of the numerous authors whom he quotes, and such brief comments are served as serve either to connect the passages selected or to explain their meaning and force. It is thus a matter of less importance that his own style is not attractive. The sentences are often of inordinate length and the constructions awkward and confused. On the other hand, the diction is simple, appropriate, and free from all affectation of eloquence or rhetoric, artifice. Bishop Lightfoot's judgment is, as usual, very accurate when he speaks of the want of rhetoric, vigor, and expression, but adds that the forcible and true conceptions which it exhibits from time to time, more especially bearing on the theme which may be briefly designated God in History, arrests our attention now, and must have impressed his contemporaries still more strongly, while in learning the comprehensiveness it is without a rival. The same great critic passes a less favorable judgment on the arrangement of the contents. The division, he says, are not kept distinct. The topics start up unexpectedly and out of season. On this point, I may be allowed to plead on behalf of Eusebius that if he deserves the censure, it is not from want of very careful endeavor to avoid it. His best defense is to be found in his very frequent explanations of the purpose and arrangements of his work. In his first sentence, Eusebius shows us that the proper title of his proposed work as a whole is The Demonstration of the Gospel, of which the first part, or more briefly, is intended to explain beforehand the objections which are likely to be urged against the Christians in their religion by both Greeks and Jews. These objections refer to three main points. 1. Abandonment of the ancestral religion of the Greeks. 2. The acceptance of the foreign doctrines of the barbarians, i.e. the Jews. And 3. The insistency of rejecting the Jewish sacrifices, rites, and general manner of life, while appropriating their sacred scriptures and promised blessings. The third point, however, is not included in the preparation for the reasons stated in the closing sentence, 856A6. But is left for consideration in the demonstration. The 15 books contain the discussion of the first 2 points are divided into 5 groups of 3 each, and this distribution is clearly indicated at the beginning of each group of books. I, IV, VII, XXII, while in the first chapter of the book, XV, we have a clear summary of the whole preceding argument, showing how the several divisions have been treated each in 3 books. The first 3 books discuss the threefold system of pagan theology, mythical, allegorical, and political, 78b, 3d, 3. The next 3, IV, VI, give an account of the chief oracles of the worship of demons and of various opinions of Greek philosophers on the doctrine of fate and free will. Books VI through IX give reasons for preferring the religion of the Hebrews, founded chiefly on the testimony of various authors to the excellency of their scriptures and the truth of their history. In books XII, Eusebius argues that the Greeks had borrowed from the older theology and philosophy of the Hebrews, dwelling especially on the supposed dependence of Plato upon Moses. In the last three books, the comparison of Plato with Moses is continued, and the mutual contradictions of other Greek philosophers, especially the Peripatetics and Stoics, are exposed and criticized. A like orderly arrangement is observed in the smaller division of each group. Book I, or Book 1, after stating the general purpose and plan of his intended work, chapters 1 through 5, Eusebius takes a brief survey of the earliest notions of the origin of the word, of mankind, and of the gods from the writings of Diodorus Siculus, Plutarch, Xenophon, Plato, and Porphyry, chapters 6 through 9, 17b, 30d, showing that a simpler worship of sun, moon, and stars had preceded the endless theogonies and bloody sacrifices of the manifold forms of superstition among the heathen nations. The remainder of the books, 31a, 42d, is occupied by Philo's translation of Sanchuniathon's account of the Phoenician theology, and Sanchuniathon's is spelled Sanchuniathon, and then apostrophe S. Okay, which is Sanchunion. In Book 2, the religion of Egypt and of Greece are described in the words of Diodorus and of Clement of Alexandria, after which Eusebius himself states his reasons for rejecting both the gross legends of the older mythology and the physical explanations by which later philosophers endeavored to throw a decent veil of allegoric interpretation over the shameless obscenities of their ancestral religion, and ends the book by a description of the comparative purer religion of Rome from Dionysius of Halicarnassus, and Dionysius of Halicarnassus is spelled Dionysius, Dionysius, and Halicarnassus, which is really hard to pronounce, is Halicarnassus. In Book 3, the physical explanations of the Greek and the allegoric theory of the Egyptians are further described in the language of Plutarch, Diodorus, and Porphyry, with brief criticisms by Eusebius himself, chapters 1 through 8. Then, after quoting the Orphic hymn in which Zeus is described as the all, both body and soul, of the universe, with Porphyry's comments upon it, Eusebius proceeds to examine quietly at leisure what, after all, the verses declare Zeus to be. 102a. On this passage, Gessner founded a charge of forgery against our author, whom he supposed to have introduced the verse in order to show that the Orphic poem taught the existence of the one true God. And even Codworth, strangely, fell into the same error. Intellectual System, IV 17. Fortunately, Eusebius, while refuting Porphyry, has given us his own interpretation of the verses, showing at considerable length, 102a through 108a, that they represented the world as a great animal to which the name of Zeus is applied, his mind being nothing else than the ether. Compare Valkenaer, Valkkenaer, diatribe, diatrib, de, Aristobulo, aristobulo, xxvi. After quoting Porphyry again in the physical theologies of Greece and Egypt, 108b through 117b or d, Eusebius himself exposed their contradictions and absurdities in 5 remaining chapters of the book, 118a through 127c. In the second group of 3 books, IV to VI, he passes on from the mythical and physical systems of Greek theology to the political forms of religion upheld and enforced by laws of the several states. Books IV and V are only occupied with discussions of the oracles and their pretending prophecies and healings, which are attributed both by Eusebius and by the witnesses whom he quoted to the activity of evil demons. The evidence of these subjects is for the most part taken from Porphyry's work on the philosophy to be derived from oracles, fragments of which are preserved by Eusebius, and his extant of well-known work on abstinence from animal food. The last 9 chapters are devoted to the subject of human sacrifices. The chief witnesses being Porphyry, Dionysius, and Halicarnassus, and Diodorus Siculus. In Book V, the nature and operation of demons, the incantations by which they may be controlled, in their regard for the images in which they are supposed to be presented or present, are described in extracts from Plutarch on the cessation of oracles, from Porphyry's work already mentioned, and from his Epistle of Enibo. The latter half of the book is occupied by most interesting and witty satire upon the oracles for the work of Oenomas, Oenomaus, entitled The Detection of Impostors. Book XI is devoted to the subject of fate and free will in connection with astrology, the evidence being supplied by Porphyry, Oenomaus, I'm just going to call her Oenomaus, Oenomaus, Diogenes, Diogenes, Diogeneanus, Alexander of Aphrodisias, Aphrodiasias, Bardesanes, the Syrian, and Origen. In the 6th chapter, we have a good specimen of the clear argumentative style of Eusebius himself. with much force and earnestness. He defends the freedom of the will against the fatalism of pagan religion, and especially of the Stoic philosophy. By the independence with which he maintains the cause of liberty, morality, and duty, it is evident that no such teaching as that of Pelagius has had as yet disturbed men's mind, or called forth the decisions of the Church on the doctrines of grace. Dictionnaire des Sciences Philosophiques II 340. The next group consisted of books XII through IX, deals with the religion of the Hebrews. Of book XII, the first half, 298d through 322d, is the work of Eusebius himself, describing the lives and religion of the patriarchs and the doctrines of Moses and the prophets of divine providence, on God as the first cause of the universe and on the Word as the second cause. In the latter half of the book, the same subjects are illustrated from Jewish and Christian authors: Philo, Dionysius of Alexandria, Origen, and Methodius. Beck VII consists of the history of the Septuagint as described by Aristeas, of quotations concerning the Exodus and the law from Philo, Josephus, and Eleazar the high priest, on the biblical anthropomorphism from Aristobulus, and 2 accounts of the Essenes from Philo, followed by his views of creation and of providence. Book IX contains the testimony of heathen writers who have made mention of the Jews, a 3rd account of the Essenes by Porphyry, quotations by Josephus from Hecataeus of Abdera, Clericus the Peripatetic, 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 Chlorillus the poet, Abedinus, author of the Assyrian history, the Sibyl, and others on the deluge and Tower of Babel. The remaining 26 chapters of the book are chiefly occupied by several important extracts from the work of Alexander Polyhistor concerning the Jews, which include long passages from the lambic poems of Theodotus and Ezekiel on events in Jewish history, the spurious letters of Solomon to Vaphrys, king of Egypt, and Saran, which is Hiram of Tyre, with descriptions of Jerusalem and other matters by various authors. In the next group, books X to XII, Eusebius gives examples from Clement, Porphyry, and Diodorus of the plasms of Greek authors, both from each other and, as they argue, from the much older scriptures of the Hebrews. The testimony to their antiquity is drawn from chronography of Africanus and from Tatian, Clement, and Josephus. In Book XI, Eusebius proposes to show the argument of Plato as the representative of Greek philosophy with the Hebrew scriptures, adopting a threefold division of ethics, dialectic, and physics. He notices the moral teachings of the sacred writers, their literacy methods, accurate reasoning, and correct use of significant names, their knowledge of the natural world, and their contemplations of the true being of things unseen, with chapter 1 through 9. He then quotes the comments of Numenius in his sayings, "What else is Plato than Moses, speaking Attic Greek?" And Plutarch's treatises on the EIO of Delphi 10 and 11. Other points of comparison are the ineffable nature of God, his unity, the second cause as contemplated by Philo, Plotinus, Numenius, and Amelius, the third divine power of the Platonic eponymus, chapters 12 through 30. The nature of the good and of the ideas as stated by Plato in the Republic and Timaeus is illustrated by quotations from Numenius, Philo, and Clement of Alexandria, 21 through 25. The existence of evil power, the immortality of the soul, and the divine image as taught in the Eusebius of Phaedo and illustrated by Porphyry's answer to Boethus on the soul, the creation of the world and the heavenly bodies and goodness of God's work, their changes and dissolution, the resurrection of the dead, and the final judgment are all brought into comparison and illustrated from Timaeus, Republic Politicus, and Phaedo, and from fragments of Plutarch on the soul. In the book XII, the comparison of Plato with the Hebrew scriptures is continued on the simple instructions of children, the need of faith, the qualification of rules are described in the laws in Gorgias and the Republic, chapters 1 through 9. The picture of the just man and his fate in the Republic, paradise in the Garden of Zeus, and the origin of mankind, male and female, in the Symposium, the deluge, the right foundation of law, religious training, the use of poetry, music, and wine, and the control of the passions, all illustrated from the Laws, chapter 10 through 28. Other subjects brought into the comparison are the contrast of true philosophy and spurious wisdom, Theaetetus, Theaetetus, the education of women, which is Republic, the passage of the Laws and Republic corresponding to the Hebrew Proverbs and laws of Moses on the memory of the just, riches, and poverty, and the honor due to parents on slaves, landmarks, and thieves, chapter 29 to 42. Other coincidences are found in the use of certain examples and figures of speech, in the division of a nation into 12 tribes, in the situation of the chief city, and in Plato's thoughts on faults in education, Republic, on atheism, on God and divine providence, Laws. In Book XII, Eusebius quotes with approval Plato's opinion on the absurdities of Greek mythology in the Timaeus, Republic, and Eutiphoron, Eutiyphron, chapter 1 through 5. On steadfast adherence to truth even unto death, in the Crito and the Apology of Socrates, chapters 6 through 11, adding the testimonies of Aristobulus and Clement to the agreement of Plato and other Greek philosophers with the Hebrew Scriptures, chapter 12 and 13. The remainder of the book treats of matters in which Plato's teachings is condemned concerning the belief of the common people, Timaeus and Republic, a multitude of inferior gods and demons, the nature of the soul, Timaeus, criticized by the Platonist Severus, the worship of heavenly bodies, Laws, and Timaeus, the treatment of women, Laws and Republic, unnatural vice, and laws of murder. In Book XIV, the consistent truth of Hebrew doctrines adopted by Christians is contrasted with the contradictions and conflicts of Greek philosophers, showing how Plato criticizes his predecessors in the Theaetetus and Sophista, and was himself criticized by his followers in the successive academies, who in their turn are subject to the keen satire of Numenius, chapter 1 through 9. The subject continued in quotations from Porphyry, Xenophon, Plato, Plutarch, and especially from Aristotle's of philosophy against the schools of Parmenides, Parmenides, who rejected the evidence of the senses of Aristippus, Metrodorus, and Protagoras, who believed them alone, and of Pyrrhonists, who believed nothing at all. The doctrines of Epicurus are refuted from the writings of Aristotle's, Plato, and Dionysius of Alexandria, chapter 21 through 47. In Book XV, the moral character of Aristotle is defended against the slanders of Epicurus and others by Aristotle's. But where he differed from Plato and the Hebrews in regard to virtue and happiness, the ideas of God and his providence, the creation of the world, the fifth corporeal essence, the nature of heavenly bodies, and the immortality of the soul. His doctrines are severely criticized by Atticus and Platonists. Chapters 2 through 9. His description of the soul as an intellitia is further criticized by Plotinus, Porphyry, and Atticus. 10 through 13. The Stoic philosophy is discussed by Aristocles, Arius, Didymus, Porphyry, Longinus, and Plotinus. 14 through 22. The remainder of the book is occupied with the long extract from Plutarch de Placitis Philosophorum on the various physical theories of the world, followed by the judgment of Socrates on such questions from the memorabilia of Xenophon. After this survey of the contents of the preparation as described chiefly by Eusebius himself, I think we are in fairness bound to acquaint him of the charge of confusion in the divisions of the work and arrangement of its topics. His occasional repetitions are for the most part confined to quotations, and especially to certain well-known and striking passages of Plato, which are used more than once in different branches of the subject and with different applications. Okay, so now the literary value of the preparation of the gospel will be most fully appreciated by considering a separate list of chief fragments of the ancient authors of the preservation, of which we are indebted to Eusebius in that work. A. Fragments of poetry. 1. An interesting epigram by Calamachu on the simplicity of the primitive statues. 99b. This is contained in a fragment of Plutarch de Daedalus Plutinsibus, which is spelled Dedaedalis, Plataeensibus. 2. A fragment of Euripides, Euripides, Melanipe Captiva, which is spelled Melanpecaptiva. Characters of bad and good women. 4466b. And then 3 large extracts in iambic verse from the Exodus, a tragedy by the Jewish dramatist Ezekiel. 436c 10 through 446d2, on which Schuler, Jewish people, I 3:224. And then 4 fragments of an epic poem on Jerusalem by a Jew named Philo. 421c D, 430c, 453a, cf. Shore Ibid 222. And then 8 extracts from the epic poem of Theodotus on the Jews describing Sichem and narrating the story of the sons of Emor, E-M-M-O-R, which is 426b through 429a. Cf. Shorer, I bid 224. Then 6. Many of the oracles quoted by Eunomaus, or Oenomaus, Oenomaus, in the detection of impostors, 209c through 234a. Then 7. All the oracles contained in the work of Porphyry on the philosophy to be derived from oracles, 123d through 124b, 145a through 146b, 168b to 175c. Or no, 168b and then 175c. These oracles, with their context, are carefully edited by Wolff in his work Porph de Philos, P-O-R-P-H, comma, or period, D-E-P-H-I-L-O-S, period, E-X, O-R-A-C-U-L-I-S, H-A-U-R-I-E-N-D-A, ex auricularis horrenda, of which they form the chief substance. 8. Pender, Fr. Insert 2, 105. There's just a bunch of crazy stuff on that one. Okay. Basically, this is the quotations that's going through there. There's a whole bunch of them on there. On the conclusion, the work which has been my chief occupation and my delight for several years is now drawing to a close. I have to renew my thanks to friends already mentioned in the preface to Volume I, to Dr. Sunday, whose counsel and encouragement first led me to add to the English translation a revised text to Dr. Redpath, by whose many useful suggestions and careful corrections of the proof sheet I have been aided throughout, to Dr. John Meyer, the professor of Latin in the University of Cambridge, and Dr. Joseph Meyer, to the Rev. W.R. Ing, one of the rare students of Plotinus, to Dr. H.H. Turner, F.R.S. Sullivan, professor of astronomy, and last but least to delegates, secretary, and other officers of the Clarendon Press, to whose unfailing kindness and invaluable help I am most deeply indebted. Of the inadequacies of my own work I am painfully conscious. To do full justice to so large compilation from all branches of ancient literature, the editor himself should be historian, poet, philosopher, archaeologist, astronomer, ethnologist, and I certainly am none of these. For all errors and defects which remain uncorrected, I can only trust to receive the indulgence for which old age not often pleads in vain. Try reading it. He did a good job, other than reading my own things. But this was, I believe, book 1, part 1, and he's basically bringing up an introduction to what's going on in the book. There's a part 2, 3, and 4, 2 that goes to it, and this is book 1, part 1, so there's a book 1, part 2, I believe, and I will have that one going on later on, but I am going to stop here because I know that this is a pretty long video, and I'm probably going to have to go through and, well, I know I'm going to have to do it, but I'm going to have to go through and put my sound on the XSplitter because these XSplitters just have crappy audio. But before I stop, I want to also point out when this book was going on, you have to remember that this was during the time that Christianity was being adopted into the Roman Empire, okay, and it was going from the Christians being persecuted to them not being persecuted, and Eusebius is beginning to criticize the pagans and their beliefs and things of that nature. And at the same time, what's happening is these pagan beliefs start to merge into the Christian beliefs, and the Jewish beliefs are starting to become an issue too. And then he's writing also about the Egyptians, and during that time period, Egypt was actually a Christian. It was a part of the Roman Empire, and it was a part of the Christian beliefs, and that was the beginning of the mystery schools. People had to hide out because they didn't want to be, considered heretic and killed for it. So this is the end of my video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, share, make some comments if you want to. I'd hear what you have to say. And I apologize for not being able to pronounce words, my enunciation. I am working on that, and I hope I get better. Hopefully, if I read more stuff like this, my reading will become a lot better than what it was. So, thanks for listening, and have a good day.